motivation. I recall how we're afflicted by afflictions and karma. How we don't have any actual free choice, but instead are controlled by the power of these disturbing attitudes and emotions and the actions we've done under their influence. To really be aware of that lack of freedom. What it means to have our lives run by afflictions and karma. Make a strong determination that now, while we have this brief chance to free ourselves, that we're going to make every effort to do so. And then realizing that everybody else is in the same situation. Let's determine to become fully enlightened Buddhas, to be able to lead them to liberation as well. So recalling that someone is under the influence of afflictions and karma can be a very good way to help us become more tolerant and patient with them. Because usually if somebody says something or does something that we don't like, we react to them as if, this person is bossing me around, or this person is criticizing me. This person is doing X, Y, and Z. But if we realize that the person is completely under the influence of afflictions and karma at that moment, they are not thinking clearly. It's helpful to say, so-and-so has an afflicted mental state right now. As if they were the child who's very sick that we were talking about yesterday, or as if they were a person who were out of their mind and didn't know what they were doing because the afflictions were running the show. And so remembering that, then not getting angry at the person, not getting upset with the person, not taking what they're saying so seriously as if it were the truth, because it's just something said out of the mental illness of the afflictions, out of the mental illness of their karmic propensities. And so, no sense getting angry at them. You think you can do that? Yeah? especially with somebody that you're very close to, who we see as so solid and inherently existent, to think this person at this moment is like the sick child who is hallucinating. Yeah, they're totally under the influence of afflictions. And so just as a parent, when their child is sick and, with a fever, with a very high fever, and saying all sorts of ridiculous things, the parent doesn't pay any attention. There's just compassion. And similarly, when somebody says all sorts of completely ridiculous things to us, to realize they're under the influence of afflictions and not take anything that they're saying as something meaningful or true, or even something that we need to react to. Yeah, letting it go. Sometimes, if they're taking action on something, we might need to say or do something to stop them from doing something harmful. But it's done totally without anger, because we see that it's not the person doing it, it's the afflictions doing it. So then somebody calls you a name. Somebody says, oh, you're the worst thing that ever walked this face of the earth. And really, all you have to do is ask yourself, am I the worst thing if you can't believe that they're under the influence of afflictions, if you can't go that far, then just ask yourself, is what they're saying true? Am I the worst thing that walked the face of this earth? I don't think so, So why should I react to what they're saying? Oh, well, they think I'm the worst thing that walked the face of the earth. Well, that's just a thought in their mind. And what is a thought? Can you even see the thought? Can you hold it? Is it going to last more than 1 millisecond? Okay. And so in this way, just not take it all so seriously, not make such a big deal out of, the things people say to us. Because otherwise, if we do, we can dig ourselves a nice deep hole and jump in it. Can't we? Especially if 2 people on one day say mean things. Oh, then I'm double the worst one who walked the face of the earth. Let's dig that hole, and jump in and decorate it. All the decorations are, some people put like uplifting slogans in their room. And when we dig ourselves a hole, we put all their quotations. You're the worst thing that walked in the face of the earth. You hurt me so much. I want to disown you. You're blah blah. You're blah blah. And we paste that all around the walls of our hole. And we sit there and we reread it again and again. Yeah, that's what we do, isn't it? Isn't that what we do? Yeah? Okay, so it's much better. Just realize, this person is under the influence of afflictions at this moment. They're just saying, doing whatever it is because of afflictions, not because they're thinking clearly. Yeah, so I don't need to, take it like an arrow in the heart. Come, go, go. Okay? So this is very important to be able to do if we're going to cultivate compassion for others. Yeah, because we have to make our mind a lot, impervious to all these vacillations that other sentient beings go through. Because can you imagine being a bodhisattva and every small thing that somebody says to you, either praise or blame, you react to with very intense emotion? But how are you ever going to have any time to benefit anybody? Yeah? And then all the people you're trying to help, you're so reactive. You know, oh, they love me, oh, they hate me. You know? And there's no time in our mind to be a benefit to them. Because we're spending all of our energies just being reactive to these blips of thought energy that happen to pass through their mind and out of their mouth. Yeah? It's true, isn't it? Yeah? It's true. Oh. And then also another thing I do sometimes when people say these really nasty things, you know, hurtful things, then I feel the hurt, then I go, oh, it's good I feel hurt. Yeah, instead of like, we usually go, hurt, ooh, I don't want any, get it away, and to get it away, therefore they're bad, or, you know, or I beat myself up, or something like that, rather than feel the hurt. And so just to go, oh, it's good I feel hurt. Now I'll be a little bit less arrogant. And a little bit of hurt feelings is not going to kill me. Yeah? A little bit of hurt feelings going to kill you? Some of you aren't so sure. I see some of you looking like... But if you think about it, a little bit of hurt feelings, is it going to kill you? Is it going to end your life and destroy your well-being and, you know, destroy all your virtue? No. You know, a little bit of hurt feelings. Okay? So we have to make our minds strong and, you know, not be so reactive to these kinds of things. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's something, you know, we so easily fall back into our old way of looking at things. So we have to continuously practice this, continuously remind ourselves again and again and again and again. Okay? Yeah. And especially if it's a relationship with somebody where they frequently say this kind of thing to you. Yeah? Do you have somebody in your life who kind of frequently trashes you, says mean things? How many of you have somebody in your life who frequently says painful things to you? Yeah. Right. Other than yourself. Let's just start with somebody else. How many have somebody who frequently says just piercing remarks that you know, and quite a number of you. Yeah. So it's there. Yeah. So you can dig a hole and decorate it if you want to. Or you can realize that, you know, this person's just under the influence of afflictions, that's all. That's all, like a child who is, you know, with a high fever. Yeah, or an adult with a high fever. Yeah, or a parent with dementia. Yeah, and how often, even if a parent has dementia, we react to them as if they don't have dementia, and we feel very hurt by what they say. But they don't know what they're saying. Yeah? They really don't. So, you know, they may be in our parents' body, and we always expect our parents to make sense. Yeah. But we've lived with them long enough that we should know that they don't always make sense. Yeah. And those of you who are parents know that you don't always make sense. And even if we aren't parents, we know that we don't always make sense. So, you know, there it is. Okay. That's one thing I wanted to comment on. Yeah, because in order to develop compassion, we really have to work with that mind that's hurt, that's easily offended, that takes everything so personally. Yeah? I mean, imagine, and this is something, if you're having in your meditation, go through what I was just saying and really think about it. And think of something painful somebody said to you, and don't jump and be in the middle of it, being reactive. But have that separation, stand back, and just look at them like, say, they're under the influence of afflictions. They're like a child with a fever or a parent with dementia. And look at them with compassion. Practice that in your meditation. Okay. So again, it's that whole thing of you're not right in the middle of the emotion, because then it's going to be hard to get out. But it's not intellectual, just blah, blah, blah. You're remembering that situation and how you felt, and role-playing, dealing with it in a different way, because you're transforming how you're seeing it. Okay.
A couple of days ago, what really dawned on me was it has nothing to do with me. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And I was the guest that had been reacting to over 60 years to something that has nothing to do with me. And I was just absolutely amazed.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's shocking, isn't it? 60 years you've been spent reacting, and it has nothing to do with you. It's an expression of that person's own internal confusion and pain. That's all. That's all. We just happen to be walking by. Kind of like a terrorist attack, or a drive-by shooting, you just happen to be walking by, and it comes out at you. Yeah, yeah. But it really has nothing to do with us. Yeah. I mean, I remember thinking when I was a kid, if my mom was in a bad mood, we all knew, stay away, because it didn't matter what you did, you were going to get yelled at. Yeah? So, it had nothing to do with us. Somebody's unhappy and it comes out that way. It's kind of a relief to realize that after 60 years you don't need to...
equalizing things, because I usually put myself there too. And then kind of let the wisdom mind ask the questions. And when I put myself in with the others, then I become you instead of I, and it's a little bit easier to be able to see it. But yeah, it was really overwhelming. I mean, I just, for a couple of days, I thought, I think that, just kind of, wow, I just can't believe it.
Yeah. Okay. And then yesterday in one of the interviews, somebody asked me if I would talk a little bit about emptiness and how to use it in everyday situations. And so I thought to relate it a little bit to some of the things that we've been talking about. And here I'm going to approach it not from the viewpoint of emptiness directly, but from the viewpoint of dependent arising, because dependent arising is the reason that we use to prove emptiness. So, or a reason that we use to prove emptiness. So the more familiar we are with dependent arising, the more it, loosens the grasping at seeing something as independent. Okay, it makes it easier to see as empty. So we'll approach it from that viewpoint of dependent arising. So in the equanimity meditation, and I'm seeing more and more how important equanimity is before you do any of the other bodhicitta, not before you do them, but before you can have a deep experience of them. You can certainly do that and have some experience, but the more equanimity you have, the more experience you're going to have on other bodhicitta meditations, because equanimity is preliminary. So one thing I find helpful with equanimity is, when we look at friend, enemy, and stranger, they seem so solid, like they're friend, enemy, and stranger from their own mind. And so one way to use this is to recall that actually they're not friend, enemy, and stranger from their own side, but they become friend, enemy, and stranger due to my mind, due to me establishing this criteria of anybody who's nice to me is a good person, anybody who's mean to me is a bad person, and anybody who doesn't do anything is a neutral person. So that these ideas, friend, enemy, and stranger, which are basically just labels and ideas, these things are created by my own mind. Yeah, somebody is not a friend from their own side. They become a friend because my mind evaluates them with my own ridiculous criteria and creates the category of friend that I put them in. And similarly, I create the enemies. It's very interesting to say to yourself, I am creating the enemy. Yeah? We create the enemies because, again, we make up this self-centered criteria, evaluate them by that, and then say they're an enemy. And then, of course, anybody we say is an enemy, then we feel angry and upset with. Okay? So here, just seeing that it's our mind that created these categories, it's our mind that puts the label on them, that labels these people, friend, enemy, and stranger, and then we believe that these labels are true. We believe that's who the person is from their own side, because we've forgotten that we were the one that gave them that label. Okay? So that can help us see that, they are not friend, enemy, and stranger from their own side. Just by process of mental labeling that they become such, and that my criteria for putting them in those categories is very silly, actually. And we can see they're not inherently friend, enemy, and stranger, because somebody else looks at our friend and calls them an enemy, and looks at our enemy and calls them a stranger, and looks at our stranger and calls them an enemy. So from their side, they're none of these things. The person we think is an awful person, somebody else thinks is, the best thing since sliced bread. Yeah? So it's, to really think, this is labels coming from my mind. They don't exist from their own side that way. Okay? So this can be very, very powerful to do. And it's very good to do this also when you watch the evening news. Okay? Practice it as you're watching the evening news. Don't just let somebody become a friend or an enemy. But watch how, somebody agrees with my ideas, they go in this camp. If somebody disagrees, they go in that camp. Now watch how we create those things. Yeah? So that's one way to bring the perspective of dependent arising and things existing merely by being labeled into the picture, and it helps make friend, enemy, and stranger not so solid. Okay. Another way to bring emptiness into what we've been talking about, especially with equanimity, is we often, with our friends, it's my friend, my dear one, my beloved one, my mother, father, brother, sister, child, grandchild, aunt, uncle, my. Yeah, you know that one? My. Yeah. So to ask ourselves, because we're so used to labeling these people my, and then therefore having some special relationship. As soon as we label them mine or my, then there's some special, criteria we bring into it. Yeah, you're mine, therefore you. And of course they don't, but we expect them to. And then to ask ourselves, what makes that person mine? What makes that person mine? Yeah? What is it in that person that is my or mine? Now, if you open up their body, is there some tag inside that says this belongs to whatever your name is? No. No tag is at first. Then you might say, well, we have the same genes in common. Okay, what are genes? They're just atoms and molecules, aren't they? Just atoms and molecules of different organic compounds. Am I my genes? Are my genes me? They're just organic compounds. Like the food we eat. The food we eat, when it's out there, we don't say, this is me. How come when we eat it, and that organic material then becomes our genes, now we think, this is me? That doesn't make much sense, does it? Yeah? We're not our genes. Our genes are just organic elements that are made out of the food from outside that we ate. So if I'm not my genes, then how can I say somebody I share a few genes with who has some same or similar organic patterns inside their bodies? How can I say that that's mine? Because I'm not even those organic patterns. So how can somebody else's organic patterns be mine? Yeah? We're not our body. They're not their body. There's no inherently existent relationship here. But this thing that we feel of, what do they say, blood is thicker than water, this comes from our mind. It comes from our mind. Yeah? And you can see it so clearly, because if they did get the babies mixed up in the hospital, whichever baby we got, we would feel the same love for. It doesn't matter whether it has the same genes as we have or not, if it got mixed up in the hospital. Okay? So you begin to see that it's only my mind that is labeling mine and then grasping it as there being something there that makes something special, that makes a mine relationship. But actually, it's just something that's merely labeled, isn't it? Just something that's merely labeled.
So how would you deal with the feeling of responsibility that you might have?
Okay, so how do you deal with the feeling of responsibility that we might have? On a conventional level, in our society, we have certain roles and certain expectations of those roles. And so one expectation, for example, of a parent is to care for the child. And also, and this is changing, there used to be an expectation of the child to care for the parent when they were elder. And in some cultures, no child would ever think of not caring for an elder parent. It's just automatic and given. But what's happening in our society? Yeah, lots of kids don't feel that responsibility to care for their parents. You know, so you can see it's labeled. I'm not saying it's good that kids feel this way, but I'm just using that as an example of saying how these things are created by the mind. So there are certain responsibilities that we have according to social roles. So we should do our best to fulfill those responsibilities. But of course everybody has a different idea of what those responsibilities are. Yeah, if you talk to everybody who's a parent, they have a different idea of what it means to be a parent to their kid. And if you talk to everybody who teaches school, they have a different idea of what it means to be a teacher, what their responsibilities are. There's a lot of things in common, but there's some things, there's also different varieties, aren't there? There isn't one set, completely boxed in, thing that you have to do. There's wiggle room in there. Okay? So we fulfill our responsibility, but we realize that this person is not mine. Yeah? So it's social convention. I care for them, but I can't make them do anything. And they're not mine. They don't belong to me. Gabriel, do you remember him? He wrote some beautiful poem about that from a parent's viewpoint, about how my child does not belong to me. Yeah, the child belongs to the world. Mm-hmm. And so, to have that kind of view of, I do this because it's the role I'm in, but I don't get attached to that role. Yeah? And I don't see that person only through that role. I realize that they're a lot more than that particular role that they are in relationship to me. Mm-hmm. Getting what I'm saying? Okay? So we still have social conventions, but we handle them a little bit lighter. We're not so, like, oh my God. You know how we get sometimes when we're like overly involved in somebody's life and assume too much responsibility so that we start feeling like, this is what it is, we start feeling like our responsibility is to control them. Yeah, isn't that where we get tied up? Where we think my responsibility is to control them, is to make them do what's good for them. Okay. We can't even make ourselves do what's good for ourselves. How in the world are we going to make them do what's good for them? Yeah? Okay. So it gives some more space to do what we can out of compassion, but without, feeling like, there's a bag over our head, and that's all there is in this world. Okay? Yeah?
The opposite of that being, we are not there.
Yeah, that's also in there. We are not theirs. Yeah? So if you're in a relationship where you feel somebody is trying to control you, to also remember, we are not theirs. But also, usually in that kind of thing, we too are feeling they are mine. They are my authority figure, whatever it is. Yeah, parent. So it's not so much that we are not theirs, it's that we're still making them mine. Yeah, instead of giving some space in there, in the relationship. Okay? And the thing is that sometimes at the beginning we may feel, oh, if I loosen this thinking of them as mine, then I'm going to stop loving them. You know, I'm going to be a bad parent, a bad spouse, a bad child, a bad whatever it is. But actually, I think what happens is because our mind is clearer and there's more clarity in our own mind, not so much grasping, that then we're able to deal with the situation better. Yeah, because we have a clear mind of how to see it. Because when there's too much me, I, my, mine in a situation, we're not thinking clearly, are we? Not at all. Okay? Because if you think about it, you know, everybody belongs to the world. Everybody belongs to the world. You don't belong to me. We do. You're mine. Therefore, you can't do this. You can't talk to this person. Don't do that. And it all comes out of, I'm terrified of losing you. But if we didn't make them mine in the beginning, we wouldn't be so scared of losing them. Okay? That doesn't mean we aren't close. We can still be very, very close. But we don't have so much fear in there. So, of course, this takes some time to work on our mind to get ourselves to this place, doesn't it? It's not going to happen overnight. So all these techniques, these things that we're talking about, we can understand them intellectually, yeah, but to change what's going on in here takes a lot of time. So don't think my practice is getting nowhere just because you can't change how you're feeling on a gut level by next week. Okay? Remember, we've been grasping onto I and mine since beginningless time. We have a strong habit there. Okay? So it's a strong habit. We're not going to be able to release this habit energy instantaneously. But what we do is we keep remembering this understanding that we have. And the more we remember it, the more we are planting seeds of it in our own mind stream, and the more we are training our mind to instead think of something in a different way, in a more realistic way. Because remember, all this I and mine, it's thoughts, it's conception. Very deep thoughts and conceptions. Some of it's innate. It just comes with us from one life to the next. But the more that we can see that these things are just made up by our own mind, the more we see that they're empty. Yeah? That things do not exist in that way. And we begin to release them. And that gives a lot more space. Now, of course, sometimes in the process of releasing them, we go, but if they're not mine, who am I? Yeah, because we realize that we have created our own self-identity completely in relationship to the people and the environment that we're in. Have you ever thought about that? How our whole idea, I'm not talking about just the innate grasping of I, I'm talking about just our whole idea of who I am, my place in the world, how people should act towards me, that we create that in relationship to everybody else around us. And we were saying the other day about how when we were kids we got certain messages, we took them in and we thought they were true, and we started acting out of them. That's exactly what I'm meaning. We're getting messages from the people and the society around us, and then creating a self-concept of who I am in relationship to that. We never think of ourselves as giving messages to other people about who they are and what the limits of who they are. Yeah. Do you ever think of yourself as giving other people messages that either give them self-confidence or take away their self-confidence? Do you ever think of yourself as helping, as being one factor, not the only factor, but one factor in somebody else creating this idea of who they are and their place in the world? So, just to realize, okay, there's conventional relationships, but these things do not exist inherently. There's nothing solid and concrete and findable. They're just conventionalities. Yeah? And so when we see that, that enables us not to limit ourselves so much by our own self-image, and it enables us to connect with so many more people, because we're not telling ourselves how different we are from them and how different they are from us. And instead that facilitates really looking into people's heart and seeing that everybody wants to be happy, nobody wants to suffer. And we're all exactly the same that way, exactly the same. It's interesting. Some of you may know that there's just been this thing of somebody traced Michelle Obama's genealogy and found that her great-great-great-grandmother, was a 6-year-old girl who was the slave of one white family, and the father of that family willed her, together with cattle and other things, to his daughter. So when he died, when the little girl, Venia, was 6 years old, she got shipped off to Georgia or somewhere to be with the new family. And she had a few children, and some of them were fathered by some white man who they don't know. In the genealogy, he is nameless, okay? But then this has come out, oh my goodness, wow, African Americans have white blood in them. And then, imagine this, people are saying, well, some people that are of mixed ancestry, black and white, can pass as white. So you know what? There might be some white people who have black blood in them. And so people, it's like there's so much reaction in the press about, this, making such a big deal about, kind of all this stuff. And I'm sitting there scratching my head saying, but we're not our bodies to start with. Yeah? But this is just an example of how strongly people hold to I am my body, or I am this race or that race. When we're all basically mutts. Aren't we? Yeah? Okay. Kev, you had something you were going to...
Well, I was just saying, when you ever, things you say, to others, I think, being a parent, and then you see their behavior or you hear their words at some point and you realize where they got it, whether it be good or bad.
Yeah, it's like, oh. Yeah.
You feel good, sometimes you go, oh my God, what they do,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We get it back. Some back.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Right, okay. So then another thing, and I do really intend to keep going and talking about, the 7 points of cause and effect, but it's just, there's many details that come in here as you're going into the meditations in deeper ways, some other tools of how to use them. I had copied a long time ago from, I think, one of Thich Nhat Hanh's books, I'm not sure, but it's called Metta, or loving kindness, love, as a diversity practice. Okay? And because in our regular form of metta, what we usually say, this is what I taught yesterday, what we start out with ourselves and then spread to others, is may I be happy and free of suffering. And then may I be free of hostility, affliction, anxiety, and may I live happily. Okay? So we're extending that message to ourselves, and then somebody that we have a lot of respect for, and on out there. Did you do that yesterday? Yeah? Okay, so it's a very nice kind of practice to do. So they took this practice and did it as a diversity practice. So I just thought I would read a little bit of it to you, and I'll leave this here, you can take a look at it, and you might want to try it. Okay, so starting with ourselves, okay, then we think, may I be happy to learn, experience, and celebrate the life experience of those who come from different backgrounds than I do. Yeah, to wish that towards ourselves. Okay. May I be free of any act of injury, offense, anger, stress, or indifference caused by myself or others. A lot in that one, isn't there? Not just what others do to me, but what I do to myself. Okay. May I live with ease and well-being, guided by patience, generosity, forgiveness, and understanding towards the conditioned experiences of all beings, with a heightened awareness of those who are different from me. Okay, so may I have these, patience, generosity, and so forth, with realizing that we're all in the same boat here, and not just towards the people who I think are like me, but especially for the people who I think are not like me, but who actually are just like me, wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. Okay. May I be free to discover and experience the Buddha nature in all beings, with the openness of a newborn child towards his or her parents. Okay? So especially being able to look at people or even life forms, scorpions, snakes, skunks, beings who are different from me, may I be able to see Buddha nature and potential in them as well. Okay, so we start that beginning with ourselves. Then they have us do the same thing towards the community with which we most identify. So whether we identify with a racial, ethnic, religious, gender, sexual preference, socioeconomic, educational level, group, whatever we most identify with, by going through those same exact steps, wishing that for the entire group. Okay? Now, so let me do that there. And so here you're thinking in a little. So think of one group that you identify with. Yeah, and listen to it through the ears of that group, that identity. May we be happy to learn, experience, share, and celebrate the life experiences of those who come from different backgrounds than we do. May we be free from any act of injury, offense, anger, stress, or indifference caused by ourselves or others. May we live with ease and well-being, guided by patience, generosity, forgiveness, and understanding towards the conditioned experiences of all beings, with a heightened awareness of those who are different from ourselves. May we be free to discover and experience the Buddha nature in all beings with the openness of a newborn child towards his or her parents. Okay. And then they have it spread to a benefactor or a dear friend, to a neutral person with whom you may or may not share the same cultural, ethnic, sexual, or economic background or physical abilities. Okay. Then on to a person with whom you've had a different intercultural experience. And then continuing with a community or cultural group that has been difficult for you. Yeah? And cultivating all these wishes in relationship to all those people. So I think it's quite a good thing. Maybe this coming meditation session, somebody could lead this. And because I was just reading it, kind of going rather quickly between the steps. But I think it might be good. You want to do it? And to do it and do it very slowly and give everybody time to think about each of these points. And within each point, there's many sub-points, aren't there, to really think about them. I think it could be quite interesting, huh? So, just to think about whoever we think of as other. It could, we usually think of race, ethnicity, gender, these kinds of things. But also, socioeconomic things, educational things, career, what your job is. Yeah? What your hobbies are. What your age is, how much we identify being of a certain generation or a certain age and a prejudice against others. Or not necessarily prejudice, but we don't understand the diverse experience of people who have different ages. Or physical abilities. How we relate to people who have different physical abilities, better or worse than we do. How do we relate to fantastic athletes? How do we relate to those who are challenged in different ways? Okay? I think it could be quite interesting to do this as, really cultivating loving compassion for all these living beings. Here they have it as a diversity practice amongst human beings, but I think we could very legitimately add animals to it. And think of different animals, because it's not like we have the same love and compassion for all animals, do we? Yeah? What would that be like if we really kind of extended it? Thought first about, the animals we like and then the animals that we don't like? Yeah? Okay. I think it could be quite powerful. Okay, so like I was saying before, love and compassion in the 7 points have no fixed order. One may come first, the other may come second, in terms of their order of generation. Then from there, we go on to the 6th point, which is the great resolve. And this is making the resolution that I'm going to do something about it. Okay? So when we have love and compassion, we're thinking how wonderful it would be if people had happiness, how wonderful it would be if they were free of suffering. With the great resolve, we're saying, I'm getting involved. We're signing up. Okay? We're signing up. We're saying these people are not different from me. Yeah, that I have some responsibility, that I want to act on my deepest feeling of love and compassion for them and be actively engaged. Okay? So that's the great resolve. So you have a great resolve that's affiliated or associated with love that wants to bring happiness, a great resolve associated with compassion that wants to alleviate beings from suffering. So those 6 are all the causes, and since it's called the 7-point cause and effect instruction, there's one effect, okay, and the effect is bodhicitta. So after you have, or put it this way, when you have the great resolve and you're saying, I want to get involved, then you have to stop and think, how do I go about doing this? It's great to have this energy that wants to be involved and bring happiness and stop suffering, but how am I going to do this? So when we look around in this world, who is most capable of bringing benefit and stopping suffering? Okay. Now, from a worldly view, we may say, a political leader, a religious leader, a leader of an NGO, we might look at it from that way. But here we're not looking at it from that viewpoint. We're looking at it as who has the greatest capacity to bring the greatest benefit to others. Okay? Not my mom, not my dad, not the politicians, not the scientists. They all have some ability, but they don't have the greatest ability. The arhats have some ability, but they also stay in their own personal peace. Yeah, so that's not the ultimate ability. The bodhisattvas have ability, but their minds aren't completely free of all the obscurations yet. They still may have either afflictive obscurations or cognitive obscurations. Okay? So who is it whose mind is most completely free of the obscurations, and who from their own side has no hindrances to being of benefit, and has all the internal qualities and capabilities to be able to be of the greatest benefit? And when we search around in the world and really think about it, who is able to bring the greatest benefit to others? Yeah, we come up with somebody who is fully enlightened. Yeah, a fully enlightened being. So then we say, therefore, I aspire to become fully enlightened so that I can work for the welfare of others most effectively, so that from my side I don't have any obstacles, and from my side I have all the abilities necessary to be able to be a benefit. Okay? So that's how we get to the bodhicitta. So it's good to spend some time, in love and compassion, and then making the great resolve, and then really thinking about, okay, if I have this intense great resolve to dedicate my life for the welfare of others, how can I best enact it? Yeah? Is it by remaining little old me, with all my self-image problems and self-hatred and afflictions and blah blah? Is that the best way to benefit? I don't think so. Yeah. Well, we have incredible potential and capability inside that can be actualized and brought out. Because we have the Buddha nature, the ability, the potential to become a fully enlightened being. And when we look around in the world, somebody with the qualities of a fully enlightened being has the greatest ability to be of the greatest benefit. Okay? So really thinking deeply about that, because we have to expand our mind, Our mind so easily just gets caught in this life and what we see. But really think over a vast period of time, not just, how am I going to change the world and get the health care package passed for America, okay? But how am I going to help beings get liberated from being born in samsara? Because if they're not born in samsara, then you don't have to worry about the health care. Okay? I'm not saying neglect the health care. I think it's an extremely important issue in this country. Yeah, it's a very important issue. But let's not trap ourselves by thinking that's all there is, and let's have a big mind, okay? And really look outside of that.